I don't know if it's true for you, but I find that the older I get, the more I forget. All sorts of things that I once had at my fingertips have disappeared into oblivion. It's as though I'd never known them. Though sometimes some little snippets of information will pop into my mind out of nowhere, long forgotten, but evidently had survived somewhere at the back of my mind. On the other hand, there are things that I can recall easily and vividly, usually because of the circumstances in which I first heard them. One little example is the Latin word for fickle, which is remarkable because I've probably forgotten more Latin than I ever learned 60 or 70 years ago. It was due to the circumstances. A few of us in the Latin class at St Mary's Secondary School here in Bathgate used to meet over a lunchtime with the Latin teacher, Mr Crow, for extra tuition. I know we must have been daft, but we were Latin daft. Anyway, I recall we were trying to translate a set passage, and I was stuck for the word fickle. And Mr Crow could sense that I was in difficulties, and he said, "What's wrong, Hugh?" And when I told him, he suddenly drew himself up. He was very tall, gaunt looking almost, a bit thin on the top, but a lovely man. And he took hold of the lapels of the black academic gown which he always wore. And suddenly, to my surprise, he broke into song, the song from Act 3 of Verdi's opera Rigoletto. La donna mobile, mobile, moving, fickle. There was no way I was ever going to forget that. And today it comes sharply into focus, comes to my mind as we begin Holy Week, Palm Sunday, and the story of fidelity versus fickleness, our fickleness, and not just women's, as Verdi might seem to suggest, but the fickleness that all of us are capable of. Most of us probably from time to time have had occasion to look back over our lives and wonder how we will be remembered in the main. For most, if not all of us, the picture won't be of one big bed of roses, a life unfolding at a gentle pace, revealing ever more opportunities for us to spread peace and joy and goodwill. That's the stuff of fairy stories. Real life is more like a roller coaster. It's out of your control, full of ups and downs, tosses and turns. One moment it lifts you up and you can laugh, and the next moment it plunges you dangerously low, leaving you holding on for dear life and screaming inside, if not aloud. When we do look back, hopefully there will be memories, and many memories, of our own fidelity. Times when we were faithful to our deepest convictions, to our conscience, to our dearest and closest family and friends, to our sense of duty and responsibility. Times when we showed real passion for and commitment to the truth and to justice, to fair play and harmony. And when we were faithful, if you think about it, we were at our best. We were happy, and we helped make others happy too. That's how it goes. It's good to recall the story of our fidelity and thank God for the gift of our faith that has helped us to make good decisions and choices over the years and has kept us more or less on the straight and narrow, so that if God were suddenly to call us home for a reckoning, we would not be found totally wanting, our bank balance of grace well into the red. Rather, we would arrive with some level of goodness in our hearts to help tip the balance in our favour. But alongside memories of our fidelity, when we look back over our lives, there will also be memories of our fickleness. The times we chose to be indecisive, to turn a blind eye or ear to a glaring injustice or a call for help, evidence perhaps of abuse or discrimination towards another, the times we changed our minds because there was more in it for me. We may recall times when we were silent, when a word from us would have made a difference, or the times we'd let ourselves be persuaded that something was okay because everybody else seemed to think so. There were times when we were just perhaps too tired or couldn't be bothered to fulfill a duty, our obligation to family, to friends, to the community, to the church, to God. I think the problem most of us face is not a lack of good intentions. Deep down, we want to do just not what's right, but what's best. We want to live lives that are fulfilling for ourselves, but equally fruitful for other people. But a lot of factors, some from within ourselves at times, hurts, greeds, jealousies, fears, all that works against our best interest, but also from outside ourselves, public opinion, circumstances, ridicule, bad company, slick arguments, peer pressure. They all conspire to keep us from following through and putting our good intentions into action. And that's when we show ourselves to be fickle, too open to suggestion, to pressures, to seduction, anything and everything that allows us to put off, as they say, the evil day. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Mind you, we have to be careful not to overestimate our own potential and promise that we couldn't possibly deliver. Our intentions have to be realistic and appropriate. Don't get above yourself. Don't try to play God. I'll give you a little example that will illustrate the point, I hope, and make you smile at the same time. During our life and our days in the seminary studying for the priesthood, we would often have retreat periods, times for silence and reflection, several times during the year, but each year there was a full week's retreat given by an invited, well-known priest retreat director. And the first evening was crucial. His first appearance, his first talk given in the chapel would give us an indication of what sort of week we might expect. We liked a lively, engaging speaker. And at the end of the week, when we came out of silence, the first question at breakfast on the Saturday morning was always, "What did you think of the retreat director? Marks out of 10. Well, I recall one great retreat. We had all that we could want. A retreat director who was lively, young, full of stories and challenging. One of my friends, long since gone I'm afraid, was a very dramatic, highly charged individual, open to sudden outbursts of good intention, could I say. Well, on the Saturday morning, with the silence over at breakfast, he held court. "See that first night," he said, "I just felt this is going to be a great retreat. As the priest spoke, I could feel the fire in my belly. I could hardly contain myself. And after the talk, it was time to retire to our rooms. It was bedtime. I got ready for bed. I looked at the bed and I thought, no way." I whipped everything off the bed, including the mattress, and I lay down on the springs. This would be my special offering to the Lord for this week. And I lay there, he thought, teeth clenched, feeling the springs dig into my flesh. And after about 2 minutes, I thought, what to blazes with this? I got up, put everything back, and got into bed. And then he said, "You've got to be careful not to become extreme." Well, we all laughed. But I've never forgotten that. And it does show how we can be fickle, even with the best of intentions. I'm reminded of another retreat priest confessing that at his ordination he got a card from a well-wisher that read, "You will do great things for God." And he said, in my naivety, I believed that. But over the years as a priest, he admitted, he came to realise that it just wasn't true. And what's more, it didn't really matter. What did matter was he had come to realise that it was God who would do great things for him and through him. An old Christian saying goes, act as if everything depends on you, but know that it ultimately depends on God. That is the message of this week just beginning. What we call Holy Week was originally called the Great Week, when we are called to reflect on the great things that God has done and continues to do for us and through us for others, when we are not fickle but faithful. In the 1950s, a German Benedictine nun, Emilian Lohr, wrote a wonderful reflection on the Great Week. And in chapter 1, she paints a striking image for us of a ship entering port after a long, arduous voyage. It's homecoming, a time to weigh anchor, restore the timbers and the spirits, repair what's damaged. The church, she said, is like that ship coming into port, to be renewed and refurbished, refreshed, and to enter the passion of Christ. That's what Holy Week is all about. And we let what happened to Jesus happen to us. Today's Gospel is the story of the Passion of our Lord as found in Mark's Gospel. It provides great food for thought and reflection with lots of details. I want to draw your attention, first of all, that in Mark's account, no one seems to take Jesus' side. No one speaks up for him or shows any support. At least Luke tells us that the women of Jerusalem wept for him, and Simon helped carry the cross, and Matthew records Pilate's wife sending a message saying he should not act against that innocent man. But for Mark, the message is clear. The way of the cross is a lonely way. You need to stay focused and faithful against every enticement to waver or wander off course. It's no time to be fickle. And secondly, notice the crowd. Here is the extreme of human fickleness. As Jesus enters the city, the crowds acclaim him, wave their palms in welcome. A few days later, the same crowd is baying for his blood. Crucify him, crucify him. In sharp contrast, Mark introduces the story of the woman who pushed her way into the room where Jesus was with his disciples and anointed his feet with the pure nard. 300 denarius worth, that's a year's wage. She reveals the extreme of human generosity and fidelity, the fruit of being loved so much. In her reflection on the Great Week, Emiliana Lohr wants us to relax and reflect on the cross and just rest in the passion of Christ. And she suggests that we take Peter as a guide. He is a good retreat director because it was the cross that turned Peter's fickleness into fidelity. Take care and God bless.